When I start to do a developmental edit on something that's already written versus doing a developmental edit in the pre-stages of writing or even in the outlining stages of writing, I take a look at a lot of things, some of which are copy editing and some of which are marketability or reader assessment type things. So you'll notice that I've actually gone through and highlighted John's text here and given him some notes, some of which are as simple as add a period. Others are questions about word usage or other things. I wanted to talk about a prologue versus a false prologue and how that works into the reader expectations or genre expectations. And what John's got here is what is a fake prologue. You notice that he starts with chapter 1, but as you read that first paragraph, you can see that it's actually sort of heavy narration. There's not a lot of things going on, and it's more of an introductory type statement. And actually this all leads up to a monumental event that then impacts the character in the rest of the book that he's writing. So in every way except for in how he's labeled it, this is a prologue. And you can also see from the language that this is leaning more towards literary fiction or just sort of general contemporary fiction with a very strong narrative presence. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and accepting the first paragraph, I just want to look at the way that this is written and make some commentary on the sort of style that's being used. And if you notice that there is a lot of long sentences, you'll spot a lot of semicolons, some of which I've suggested that he remove. And the lengthy, heavy narration is something that's to great effect when you juxtapose it. And I think that actually what John's done here is very good, except he's missing the juxtaposition at the end, and I'll show you that in a second. Overall, there are some clauses and subclauses within the same paragraphs which can be considered run-ons, but again, with a heavy narrative presence, I don't go after the run-on sentences as heavily because I want to allow the narrator's voice to come through. And in some ways, and you'll see, drawing out the first bit of this prologue and lengthening the experience that the reader's having is actually going to be very helpful if you correctly juxtapose the event that's coming. So we'll scroll down a little bit more. Now, we get into the car, and as we get into the car, what John has chosen to do is sort of heavily foreshadow what's coming. And actually, I think this is the point where I'm going to disagree with him and say that in some ways, because of the lengthiness of the narrator's introduction, the juxtaposition is going to be helped by actually not foreshadowing anything. So what I would actually suggest for him to do is when he gets into this paragraph here that starts with Frank was attempting to pass, I would actually sort of make it as mundane as possible. And you notice that there's a lot of highlighting in this paragraph, and that's because I was finding some of the verb tenses between the past perfect and the simple past to be confusing. And that's sort of a marketability thing as well as a copy editing thing. You want to leave the reader with the easiest read possible. And in this case, I actually want him to lull the reader into sort of a false sense of confidence in what's happening. The part where he sort of gets away, in my opinion, from what he's trying to get at is the paragraph that you're looking at right now. It is an uneasy feeling to drive between two vehicles late at night. Now, he's foreshadowing, and that's something that's great for the narrator to do, especially an omnipotent narrator, to let things happen ahead of time so that the reader's expecting them. But as I was telling you, because of the way that the narrator has really lulled us into a sense of security and calmness with the earlier passages, I think that this passage could actually be omitted or even completely rewritten to, again, let the action happen very, very incrementally. And then this last paragraph here, and the one that comes just after it, again, you can see that he's really diving into the action, which is fine. However, the idea here is that Frank and his wife are in a car accident, and Frank's wife is killed, which you'll see a little bit in a moment. And with the false sense of security that you develop with the sort of slow narrative buildup, the accident then in juxtaposition can completely surprise the reader. And because this is essentially a prologue, it's actually a great way to ramp up the action and then move directly into what essentially will be sort of slow character building as you introduce the main thrust of the narrative, which in this case is going to take place 5 years after the scene that we're seeing here. There is a little bit of a problem that I ran into with the way that he wrote it, and that's that he switches into the second person for this very last paragraph. Now, I sympathize with this because in some ways the narrator is trying to talk directly to the audience, and it is a conceit for most of us not to use the word you when we are directly talking to the audience and the reader. So you may see that this convention changes over time, but generally speaking, you don't want to switch between first, third, and second persons in the same narrative unless there's some very good reasons to do so. And in this case, I think that it could easily be conveyed by just using a person, having the narrator talk more generally. However, that said, I actually would suggest that he take out all of the narrator's comments in this last bit and just have it be bam, 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 action, and then the wife's calling out to his husband as, of course, the car hits her and she dies. So in this case, even if this isn't separated out as a full prologue and it is sort of in the false prologue spot, the way that he set it up with the juxtaposition of the narrator's kind of lulling voice, if he then goes and completely changes that tone for this last paragraph, this last bit of the scene, he'll actually get a lot more impact out of the events that are happening, and then in some ways leave the reader with a lot of expectation, wanting to know more, wanting to know what happened. And by denying them that, as he goes into this very next paragraph, which I'll leave us on for this video, if you deny the reader the sort of payoff from that very tense moment in the fake prologue spot, then you'll get them to stay with you a little bit longer as you go through the slower parts of exposition. I just want to leave us here on this very first sentence, which in some ways is really great, and in some ways it'll make other people cringe. I'll read it to you and then give you a few comments, and that'll be it for this video. Sipping slowly his Harvey's Bristol cream at 9 in the morning, sitting on a long chair and gazing at the sea while listening to the ocean waves kissing the shore, the calming heartbeat of nature that relaxed him, Frank Adams was enjoying a superb view of the Gulf of Mexico from his penthouse condo. You'll notice there I've highlighted penthouse and condo because in some ways those are antithetical relationships. And I think that from a reader marketability perspective, penthouse is the word that really carries the meaning. Condo can be eliminated without losing too much. And again, it may sort of mean that the houses are stacked versus vertical, and the way that I'm seeing it in my mind as I'm reading it and the way I think he's trying to convey it is that this is the penthouse, the literally top floor of a taller building, and sort of if you read the rest of it, you would see that Frank is well off and rich and enjoying life, and so in that way the penthouse rather than condo would carry the meaning for the reader. The comments that I just want to make on this sentence is don't be afraid to have a run-on sentence. Again, this narrator, the one that John's creating, has a very slow, deliberate pacing, and that can be okay, especially as if we're going to consider this literary fiction. It's almost expected to have that sort of different pacing and the longer sentences. So that's totally fine. And actually, if you notice grammatically, this is very good as well. The whole sentence could be reversed. Frank Adams was enjoying a superb view of the Gulf of Mexico from his penthouse, sipping slowly his Harvey's Bristol cream at 9 in the morning, sitting on a long chair and gazing at the sea while listening to the ocean waves kissing the shore, the calming heartbeat of nature that relaxed him, period. So that's how you know if you're working with a lot of independent clauses, if you can switch the order of them and not lose the meaning, you're probably going to be grammatically correct. Although, again, trust your copy editor to help you make those slight things. But in this case, we're grammatically correct, and I actually am not going to tell him that he needs to change it, because from a developmental perspective, I'm actually enjoying the way that he's developing this narrator's voice. There are times later where I'm asking him to put in periods and rearrange some of the sentences, but this first sentence really does set up, again, the narrator's slow, deliberate pace, and that's something to consider when you're working on third-person omnipotent narrators. They do have their own independent natures and their own independent characters, and if you're outside of a genre that expects them to be sort of bland, go ahead and play with it, and you might be surprised at what you discover along the way. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe for more writing-related videos. Questions and comments are always welcome on Twitter.